Hello and a big welcome back to the Nick Elston Show, Season 6, Episode 8. Thank you so much for your engagement on last Monday's episode with Dave Harris, talking all things presenting and USA and lots of different stuff. An equally fascinating and amazing, wonderful, beautiful man to bring you today. It's the one, the only. Give it up for Mr. Aaron Clark.
Woo! Thank you, Nick. Lovely to see you, my friend. How are you doing?
Good to see you too. Yeah, I'm really good. Thank you very much. I love talking to you, just this time with an audience. So this is going to be interesting because I guarantee after 5 minutes we'll forget this is being recorded. So we'll apologise now for the rubbish we'll talk about. Myself and Aaron have been in contact for many years now, actually kind of pre-lockdown. Most of my contacts recently have been like post-lockdown, pre-lockdown, pre-pandemic and everything else, back in the whole hazy days of pre-pandemic. Aaron came along to one of my speaking academies in Bristol. Was a real pleasure to meet him, contributed, and on the back of that, invited him back to speak on a couple of occasions on the online version as well. And he's a wonderful man with a wonderful story to share, very kind of purpose and passion driven. And I'm just delighted to be able to bring you to my audience, really, Aaron. So tell us who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Okay, so who I am and what I do are two completely different pathways, Nick. We need a separate podcast for each. So who I am? I am an enthusiastic, energetic. I try to be as influential as possible sort of guy, and I've always been that way, really. And I guess that's the underlying fundamental thing about me in all the lines of work that I've done. So I started off very much in a military life. So I was a military child. My dad was in the forces, away a lot. I went to boarding school. That's something we'll probably dive into a little bit later, but kind of very independent, strong-willed, resilient from the outside looking in kind of childhood. A lot of expectation on my shoulders, being the man of the house when dad was away, looking after my little brother, being the man of the house for my mum. Setting that precedent, setting those kind of standards to just crack on with life in that military family world, if you like. Really struggled with the transition from primary into secondary. So I went to boarding school. I was really sick of moving around all the time in the military life. Couldn't get my head around the amount of schools that I was becoming part of, the amount of friends that I was having to get to know and then forget within the space of 6 months. So I went to boarding school, massive part of my life, boarding school. And it kind of set me up, I guess, to be this really independent, wanting to change the world kind of guy. I unfortunately lost a very close friend of mine as he took his own life when I was at boarding school. And I think that kind of, although I don't really use it as the catalyst to what I do now, I think deep down somewhere, there's this energy and this thing from that moment that kind of sets where you go in life and what you want to do and what you want to change about something that wasn't quite done right in its instance form. So I lost my best friend, and it wasn't spoken about, Nick, and that was a thing for me. It was almost overnight, we forget about that thing that's happened. We don't talk about it and we crack on. And I really struggled at that time. It was a weird time. And I resorted to sport and the gym and people and community as my kind of therapy, if you like, my kind of escape from all the things we don't want to talk about to all the things that we do want to talk about and the things we do want to get involved with. But it's only now looking back that I realized that that's what I did at that time. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Didn't even know that I was, blessed with these mental health strengths, warrior shields, whatever you want to call them. I didn't know I was experiencing those things, really. I just knew that something wasn't quite right, but sport and the gym and friends kind of helped me through that. So I went very much down the sporting route because of that, I guess. Fitness, personal training, sports degree, being a bouncer, part of the rugby team, lads. And it was within that kind of environment that I started to notice quite quickly the need for support for men and the support for men not being able to talk about their well-being, not being able to talk about the way they're feeling mentally, not being able to open conversations with their loved ones about their trauma or their difficulties, their challenges that they're facing in life, particularly in that rugby field, that gym setting, that was very prominent. So I went on to kind of working with vulnerable people, not necessarily men, but went on to work with vulnerable people in the Prince's Trust, so supporting young people, so homeless kids, supporting young offenders, those involved in domestic violence, drugs and alcohol. And I did that for a number of years, six years with the Prince's Trust. And I really loved that. That kind of opened my eyes even more about these vulnerabilities that the community possess, etc. And so I guess from there, the ball just keeps rolling and the snowball gets bigger and you get more involved with more stuff relative to that field of work. But soon found, I guess, a real passion and a niche and a specialism, if you like, from my lived experience with mental health and supporting other people on their mental health journeys. So time goes on, and I started this thing, Mental Health Muscle. It was just a case of getting some lads in a gym to talk about mental health whilst lifting some weights, lifting a few dumbbells, having a bit of a laugh and a giggle, and it just blew up. So within the space of 6 months, I went from 8 people to 8,000 people, thousands and thousands of followers on Instagram, a real reach from not just in the UK, but abroad, Australia, America. I mean, it just blew up, went massive. We did a lot of things in 4 years, a lot of things. We did a lot of fundraising, raised a lot of money. And I guess working alongside that full time and being paid nothing to do Mental Health Muscle, but no one realizing that you are the man behind the logo, behind the page. Hundreds of events, workshops, paying for memberships for people for the gym to support them with their mental health all over the country. I just crashed, just came to this wall where everything just didn't go right. And that was time for me to say, you know what? I need to step back from this. I need to do something for my own mental health and stop worrying about everybody else's for a moment or two, and concentrate on my own, because I was a mess, and I went through a really difficult period of quite severe depression, not nice thoughts, and it wasn't a good place at all for me. And that wasn't, when I think about it in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't that long ago. 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago, I went through that. Maybe just before I met you, actually, for the first time. So, it was a really difficult period. But I built up from there. I went through therapy, went through all of that, been on that journey, still do it now, still connect with my therapist often to keep myself kind of mentally well and mentally stable. And life's turned itself around. And I guess that's the message that I always wanted to give to people right at the very beginning of this whole thing, was that there is hope and there is a way through the mud. And as you lovely say, mate, every storm runs out of rain eventually, and you got to keep believing that, because I'm kind of living proof of that, if you like. And now I'm involved with mental health in Devon. I'm an advisor to a mental health charity, supporting young people and parents. I'm a trainer and facilitator on mental health consultancy across Devon and afar. That's my own private practice at AMC Health and Fitness. And I kind of just do my thing now, and I've got 2 beautiful children, a wonderful wife, lovely home in Devon, loving life and feeling very blessed and grateful. And I'm sure more challenges and more experiences will come my way, as they do for all of us. But in a nutshell, that is kind of where I am now.
Well, that's an interesting one, because literally that's the journey I take people on this show, but you've done it already. So the thing is, it's kind of,
me, I'm sorry.
Because the problem with you is you pose far too many questions, because you throw these rabbit holes open to somebody who's not only a recovering obsessive compulsive, but also a deeply curious person. Everything you were going into, like literally notes and notes, thinking like, these are things I'm going to delve into now. Right, strap yourselves in, folks. This could be the longest episode we've ever had.
Let's go.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back actually right to the beginning.
Yeah. Let's break it apart.
You live in Devon. So for those who are tuning in from outside the UK, Devon is a beautiful county in the southwest of the UK. Beautiful place. Is that where kind of you grew up as well, or due to the military element, were you kind of traveling around as well?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's not. No, so I grew up very much in Yorkshire. My family were in Yorkshire. That's where my dad's kind of last military station base was, in Yorkshire. My grandparents live in Yorkshire, and so that on my mum's side. So Yorkshire's always been home, if you like. Prior to coming down to Devon, we were in York for 9 years. I obviously went to university there, spent some time living there professionally after university. So university and kind of living a little bit in York was home at the time. My wife's from Cambridge, So nothing about us is Devon. We moved down here for professional reasons, for my wife's role and job. An opportunity that we couldn't turn down. We hadn't been together that long. And I guess being the military child I am, just uprooting and going somewhere didn't seem so much of a big deal, you know. It was very ingrained in me. For some people, that would have been a massive, like, oh my goodness, what a life-changing thing. For me, that wasn't really there. I just, let's do it. Let's go. You know, life's about risk. Life's about, you know, just making the most of every moment. So off we went. And we've been in Devon since. 2 children are born down here, both Devon children, loving it. And this is now home of homes. So.
Wow. I mean, that is huge. And because I guess that whether it's a natural setting or certainly as a common setting, that born here, live here, die here kind of mentalities in most places we come from. So you haven't got that relationship with travel or change. And I guess change broadly, we have this strange relationship with change, don't we? But we automatically assume there's danger and risk and stuff. But as you've proven, there's a lot of great things to have happened from you being able just to simply uproot and go.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And for me, I've never feared change. I've never been afraid of change. And I've witnessed that fear with change in so many different people, professionally and personally across the years. But it's always something that I've just been very willing to embrace and very willing to accept and just jump on board that wagon and get on that train and see it through. And I guess that comes out in my kind of passion and want to change things for the better. And if you can't make things better unless you change. So, you know, absolutely. I guess it's always that concept that it's always a positive thing for me. And I know for a lot of people, it's a really frightening thing having to change the ways of doing things. But we have to adapt, you know. In order to survive and thrive, we have to adapt. And so I'm very much a part of that kind of ethos, if you like. I've very much, you know, facilitated that in everything I've done for many, many years, as long as back as I can remember, really.
Yeah, and you mentioned education, that as somebody who's experienced primary, secondary, and boarding school, what would you say your experiences were of each of those, and also the main differences between the experience of being in those environments?
Yeah, so primary school was much of the same, really. I guess as most young children have as primary school. I was in the same primary school for most of my primary years, based in Germany at the time. So just my immediate family, mum and dad, and my little brother, based in Germany. So no other family or, you know, relations around us. That was quite normal, really. I guess grew up in a primary school in Germany on a military base. Went through that pretty much for 5 of the 6 years, and then dad got a post into Scotland to RAF Lossiemouth. Didn't speak a word of Scottish, and it was a big thing for us, really. Been in Germany a long time, and in Scotland the educational system is that they have a year 7 in primary school, whereas in the UK and in Germany, who adopted the UK scheme, kind of year 6, and then you move on to secondary school. So as I left Germany, I was about to embark on high school, if you like, secondary school in Germany. But because I moved to Scotland, I had to go back into primary to do my year 7. So that was a little bit of a head muddle, you know, a little bit of I'm a big boy now. I've just gone from primary to secondary, and now now we're moving to Scotland. I've got to go back to primary school to do another year. What does that mean? And that I don't know whether that was the main reason, but it certainly didn't help making friends and trying to establish myself, you know, as a very English person in a Scottish school. It's very clannish. It's very territorial. Lots of Scottish families knew each other for many years. Someone was someone's brother's daughter's son-in-law's mother's son's cousin. You know, everyone was related. It was weird. And I struggled with that. I really struggled with that. And then I just thought that was the time. All these schools and changes. I just thought I need to go somewhere where I can settle for the next 5-6 years and really get my head down. Mum and dad were heartbroken, as you can imagine, but reluctantly agreed to you know, give me the wings to fly off, and off I went to boarding school, and I was there for 5-6 years for all of my secondary school.
And for those who haven't had experiences of boarding school or have not even kind of looked into it before, what does that look like in reality? I mean, you are there 24/7. That's essentially your home.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. So there's
how does that feel in terms of kind of like always being on site, I guess?
Yeah. At first a bit weird, but almost a luxury too. That was a bit of a weird thing, kind of a mixed emotion at the start. Like, oh, I can't go off campus, but that's cool. Like there's what is there to do here? Like, make this place our own, if you like. And we often, people that I started in year 7 with at boarding school, I finished year 11 with. You don't really get much of an influx or changes. There's not massive changes and people arriving and leaving. It's not really quite how it works. So I was with the same cohort of friends for a long period of time. But yeah, it was a bit strange, but I wanted it so bad. I wanted that stability so bad that I kind of forgot about all of those different things, if you like. And I just took it on as this is what I want to do. This is where I want to be. Just make the most of it. I was very independent, Nick, very independent life. I didn't, I spoke to my mum and dad on the phone maybe once a week. Didn't go home at weekends. You live, breathe, eat, sleep your friends and school. Your classroom's around the corner from where you have breakfast. Your boarding house is around the corner from where you do English and maths. And it was strange in that sense, but nice and quite a family feel. And I guess that was, to me, very important because I'm a family man, and it was nice to have that in a school environment as well.
Yeah. So potentially it's kind of an extension of the kind of the military barracks kind of family, I guess, in its setup.
Exactly right. And it's only now that we talk about this sort of stuff that you can flick back and go, you know what? It's exactly why I did that. Because I was so used to that. That was so very normal for me. Seeing the same people every day, evening, night, morning, same people coming out the same doors, same teachers, same classrooms, same boarding. It was very normal for me. And I think for most of us who were in the military, and there was a lot of us military kids who kind of shipped off to boarding school because of the same issues, really. That was very normal for us. And I think it was the private kids that actually struggled the most with that boarding school setting because they weren't used to that. But for us, it was, normal routine, like moving around, being on your own, but being together it was very normal, very, very normal indeed. And so
was there a change of aspiration or expectation on students of boarding schools?
Yes. I mean, I think there's certainly that stigma that exists. Boarding school, you must be posh. Whereas my response always was, there's nothing posh about me, The RAF are paying for most of this. Like, yes, my mum and dad contributed, of course, in little bits. And, I'll always be very grateful to them for that. But, you do get a massive of your part of your bursary paid for. And I guess that's why there was such an influx of military kids, because that kind of scheme existed. But there is that stigma, yes, mate. And when you're friends with private kids who don't come from a military background, who go to the same boarding school as you, you're expected to kind of be a bit like them, really, have a lot of money, wear all the nicest kit, wear all the brands and all the fancy clothes. And, and that just wasn't the case. I was always very well treated and had a wonderful childhood, but I didn't have what all of those really rich and wealthy families had, and none of us did. So, yeah, there is a bit of an expectation there. When you come back out of boarding school and you tell everyone you've been a boarding school, you're a private school boy, there's that expectation of you having to be very good at everything you do. I sucked at coursework. I sucked at exams. It didn't matter where I went to school. I was poor at both of them. But luckily I had
that was the commonality.
Yeah, exactly right.
Exactly. Yeah. You very candidly and courageously actually mentioned that you lost a friend from boarding school due to suicide.
Yeah.
How old were you when that happened, and how did that kind of play out as an experience?
14.
So imagine at that age for you and your kind of your peers, that was potentially one of the first experiences of loss, certainly in terms of trauma and loss.
For sure.
How did that land with people, and how did it impact people?
So, it starts with that everybody knows each other very, very well. Yeah. And that's a great thing in most respects. But when this happened, there was another kind of split between the people that knew him very, very well and the people that just knew him well. Yeah. And I was in that, I knew him well, but I wasn't that, very, very, very well. And so you just don't get anything, Nick. That's my honest answer in that respect. We didn't get anything. It wasn't until months later, probably a year later, that everyone was informed of actually what happened. It just was not spoken about. It just that conversation, that language just did not exist in a boarding school setting. It honestly didn't. And like I say, it was almost overnight that whatever happened people are confused, perplexed, trying to deal with their emotions. But next tomorrow is another school day, and you just get on with it. And I know that it impacted all of us in different ways. It impacted me in the sense that, you know, I was close to him in the respect that I shared a boarding house with him. I saw him day in, day out. He was a bit of a role model to me, my big brother in the boarding block. But you know, it was weird, and I get frustrated that I can't remember much about it. Like that's the frustration for me. I wish I could remember more about it, but I guess the fact is there wasn't much that happened other than what happened, and so there's nothing to recollect back to.
Absolutely,
it was an experience that just kind of just came and went so quick. So
absolutely. Quick. I mean, you're very open in adult life. You're very open about kind of your experiences with mental illness and mental health challenges.
Yeah.
And sharing that lived experience. And certainly, that's one of the things that really struck me the most when we first spoke, was actually how aligned we were ethically and morally about this stuff. We weren't there to kind of fix anyone. We weren't there. We were there to try and kind of help people to reach out for those who didn't know how to reach out.
Yeah.
What were your first experiences of when you first started to struggle with your mental health, and how did that come about? How did it look? How did it feel? And kind of how old were you?
Yeah. And did I really start recognizing it? I think I really started recognizing it, like truly recognizing it, when we moved down to Devon. So that's truly recognizing it. I knew that something hadn't been right for a long time. I was very, very high functioning anxiety, have been for a long time. I get quite a bit of internal rage and like aggression about things when they don't go to plan. That's a funny thing. So I hate change when I don't get a pre-warning that something is going to change last minute. And yet I'm very much an embracer of change when it's in my control. So that's something to bear in mind, which I've never quite worked out why that is the case. But, you know, going away on holiday, changes in events, cancellations of events, all those sorts of things have really, really triggered me for a number of years, and still do now, working on them incredibly hard, but certainly cause a lot of frustration, internal rage, and why? And I can't get a hold on it. I've lost all control. So I was an adult. I was an adult when I first really truly recognized that something wasn't right. And I guess it was then that I made a lot of things happen to work on finding out what the hell was going on. But I've the expectation, I guess, from childhood hasn't helped. And I think through my therapy and through discussions with people, a lot of my childhood, although I didn't see it at the time, now I look back and maybe that was quite traumatic for me, you know, being the one left behind with my mum and my brother. Look after your family, boy, love you, mate, you're the man of the house kind of thing. Man box, very much a man box childhood, you know. Not being able to show much weakness or vulnerability. Now, that wasn't being instructed to me. That was just the way I felt. That was my perception of this kind of life that I was living. But I would say adulthood, really, Nick. And so much has happened in quite a short space of time in terms of recognizing it in myself. It's always been there to try and support others, but actually with myself, that's a much shorter time period. And so much has happened in that, and so many challenges and experiences and ups and downs have happened in that time. That it seems much longer than it probably is.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, by the way, for sharing this. I mean, that's what people connect with, isn't it? They'll listen to your kind of experience and relate that to them and how that lands with people. And it's only by people like yourself as being so candid about this that people actually get that. You're kind of sowing the seeds to ask for people to ask better questions of themselves. Yeah. Very often you don't see it coming, do you? It's like a Liam Neeson trailer, isn't it? Kind of like, you'll never see me coming. It's kind of like that. That's my best Liam Neeson impression, by the way. Doesn't get any better than that, mate. So, but also interestingly, and it's one of the things I really picked up on when I was kind of listening to your opening kind of story, your opening journey, that a lot of the environments that you immersed yourself in, even until recently, you look at kind of fitness and muscle, you look at bouncing, you look at military, they're very alpha environments. And with that, obviously, and as we know, I mean, Aaron does a lot of work, and we'll come on to this, with fantastic organizations. And again, Aaron very kindly got me in recently to talk about that. But in the military environment, that kind of alpha mentality, that's another barrier for you to navigate, because being ex-military, being boarding school, being a bankster, being the muscle fitness fanatic, they're not environments that actually encourage you to show yourself, are you? To have those kind of conversations.
No, and it's a really good point. And I think what I've tried to do with all of those is be the first person in that environment to break the ice. And if I look back at all of those roles, all of those kind of places I've been, I feel like I've done my very best to try and be that person who is the alpha, or trying to act as an alpha, but also show that being a true alpha man isn't always about strengths and victory. It's also about showing our weaknesses and showing our vulnerabilities to people, you know. And I guess encouraging that conversation with other alphas to recognize that you know, the true rounded alpha male isn't always the person that shows no weakness and seems like, you know, everything is just fine all the time, because that truly isn't the case. You know, I had a good alpha male role model in my life. My dad, you know, he showed his weaknesses. He showed his tears. He was soft as shit, really. You know what I mean? He was. But he was still an alpha. He was still a soldier. He was still all the things that, you know, dads are going to be when they're in the army, or they're in the military, or in the RAF, whatever. So I've kind of just tried to mold myself as an alpha, as you rightly say, but to be the softer version of everyone else, to try and encourage the conversations. You know, there's not many people that would stand on a door and talk to their mate bouncer about how they're feeling mentally, but I did. And so lo and behold, conversations started about how people were feeling. Like, wow, you know, I wouldn't go into a rugby team ordinarily and just start talking about how we're feeling mentally, but I did do that. And so people start talking about it like it's normalized.
It's amazing, isn't it? But that self-awareness piece for you to know, I mean, especially with you sharing that experience of mental health muscle, a thriving community, lots of members, big responsibility, but actually recognizing that actually above everything, above the visibility and the commercially, that you were running a really real risk of being that wounded healer, that you're giving and giving and giving until you drop. Maybe potentially that self-awareness only comes from lived experience.
Perhaps. And I knew when I made the decision about mental health muscle that, I mean, I still carry it with me every day. It's my mouse map, for Christ's sake. But do you know what I mean?
Merch is always a good thing,
I know. You know, but I knew that one had to go, and the one that I didn't want to go was Aaron, was the dad, was the husband. You know, that was never, I never wanted to lose any of that. And so there was no other option.
In terms of sharing your problems, you mentioned obviously it coincided with you moving to a new part of the world for you and your partner, your wife. Did you feel comfortable bringing her into your confidence around that kind of stuff, or into the confidence of the issue?
Yeah,
or was it something you had to navigate?
No, I've always been quite secure, quite happy to talk to my wife about how I'm feeling. I think there are points over our marriage, over our time together, that I could have been better. But I think that was purely because I was distracted by other things. And so there didn't seem a time to go any deeper or go into any more detail. And that caused a little bit of frustration and conflict within the marriage, of course, and it would with anybody when you know something's not right, but they're not giving you anything, and that's difficult. But we know that from the mental health world that's exactly how it exists. And so, but yeah, I feel like I had so many things going on that distracted myself away from thinking about me a lot of the time, and it was that really, I think, that needed to stop, that needed to come to a pause, so that I could truly focus on me for a bit of me time and recovery time and reflection, if you like. You know, there's a lot of part of me that I miss a lot of what I used to do. I miss it massively, but I'm a much healthier person in terms of my mental space and my mental framework than I've ever been, you know.
Did you also find that by you being the champion, the person most visible behind Mental Health Muscle, that you ended up being that kind of go-to guy. And even though that it was, like you said, when it's something's your passion, very often self-protection can go, can't it? Because we try and be that person. That you must have attracted a lot of conversations from people around you. I guess the rugby club is an extension of that. The gym is an extension of that. By you being so open and encouraging conversations and stuff, that is there that real risk that people see you as that kind of savior role?
100%. And maybe for over half of the time span that Mental Health Muscle existed as an organization, I would receive 20, 30 private messages a day.
Wow.
You know,
wow.
Most of them pouring their heart out, telling me what they're feeling, what they're thinking about doing. You know, I became not me, but the Mental Health Muscle site became the crisis line. And there was only one man dealing with that, and that was me. And at first, you want to help, you do your best, you refer and signpost people on when you feel like it's out of your hands. And I always did that. But with a man with a lot of knowledge and a lot of, understanding of things, always wanted to try and help. And I only did that out of the goodness of my heart. But there was a point where that wasn't manageable anymore. It's not sustainable. It's not what Mental Health Muscle was set up to do in the first place. We weren't a crisis service. We were, a community engagement organization that brought like-minded people together to talk about a subject that we all know we're thinking about, by doing that in a gym or doing that in a fitness environment. That's the mission. That was the goal. The vehicle for change was gym. Vehicle for change wasn't talking about suicide or self-harm over WhatsApp. That's just not. It's not what it was planned to do, and it became that at the end. So just another kind of nail in the coffin, really, Nick. I couldn't keep doing that. In order to keep doing that, the organization would have had to have changed completely, and I wasn't in the mental state to do anything more with it. I just didn't have the energy or the fire. I just lost myself completely. I was just a dummy. I was just a robot. I was just an empty vessel answering questions. Yeah, it was tough, man.
That must have been tough.
It was.
Profile Me is a super shareable mobile application designed to help professionals grow their personal brand. Proudly paperless, this powerful tool packs the power of web, social media, and messaging into one beautifully designed interface that offers a unique and human-centric way to connect and build trust with clients. Easy to share on any platform and easy to save to any phone's home screen. With Profile Me, getting referred has never been easier.
Well, maybe again, that's the reason why you're very passionate about kind of really stating your case as to why you are there for people, but also why you're not there as well. I think it's one of those things, and but I also think that's the reason why you've been really successful at what you're doing, and also with the organizations that you represent. It's because people know why you're there, and now they know why you're not there as well. And it's not to dismiss the challenges of people that trust you and have rapport with you. It's actually quite the opposite. It's to protect you so you can engage more people, isn't it? But it has to be said, one of the things that really kind of is a bugbear for me is people that are not qualified or trained or to be solution focused in that sense, who are out there trying to take on this mantle of fixing people. And for me, it's irresponsible. And I think that's the reason why we need to be really clear about give people that upfront agreement of why we're there, why we're not there.
100%.
Because people do trust you. You're a nice guy. You've been open with your experiences, so you're going to get those. But everything in you, kind of, you really want to help people, don't you? And that's the thing. And to say to somebody, look, I'm not the person for that. I'm not a coach. I'm not a counselor. However, I'll signpost you. Sometimes it just feels, but we need to protect ourselves, right?
Yeah, we do. And there were a number of occasions where those responses were exactly that. And and the difficulty was that these people wouldn't confide in anyone else. Mental Health Muscle was their go-to. Mental Health Muscle was their relevance, their magnet, their everything, became their world very, very quickly. This community became everything in their life. Nothing else mattered. They were a part of this movement. They were a part of this notion, this message, this value, this mission statement, whatever. And so anything outside of it just simply wouldn't do. But if mental health muscle solved my problems, then that was okay, you know. And that was a difficulty for me. So trying to stay in that professional boundary at all times, and recognizing very quickly that when you don't give someone the answer they want, it turns quite toxic, turns quite critical, turns quite nasty, quite aggressive. And I had a few experiences like that, and I dealt with them accordingly. I spoke to people that could support them better than I ever could. And I did that for them, but I couldn't keep doing that. When I was dealing, you know, as we move along the line of mental health muscle growing and growing, I'm mentally getting worse. The influx of demand and messages and engagement is getting higher. And it's just this TNT bomb ready to explode on all fronts.
And it does take that reason why you did do it, and that you did it to provide a positive, immersive distraction technique for people that are struggling, so that you focus their attentions on. I mean, we've spoken about mental health muscle, and we've spoken about kind of a positive distraction technique. Have you ever had experiences with negative distraction techniques? I mean, I certainly from my pub management days, for example, the relationship with alcohol, all the other opportunities that gets presented when you're in that kind of nightlife environment. Yeah. How have you found your experiences with that and actually being resilient to going down those paths?
Yeah, it's a good question, mate. Really good question. I think there's been spouts of addictiveness, but not so much with drugs and alcohol. I've always stayed very clear of drugs and alcohol. I became very addicted to the gym. Yeah. And although the gym is my savior, your savior can often become your downfall. And I very much got so enraveled in gym life. I would eat breakfast, I would eat lunch, I would eat dinner. I would spend 4 to 5 hours a day in the gym. I would meet my friends in the gym. Became very, very compulsive. Like being in the gym was that was the place to be. And so that was one, definitely. Retail therapy is something that I've always I've worked very hard on trying not to. You know, money doesn't grow on trees, but for some reason I believed it did for many, many years. And living in York, right next to the designer outlet and a Ralph Lauren shop, you know, I would spend £100, £200 a weekend in there, like no problem. Yeah. At the time, didn't realize that was probably the reasons why I was doing that, and it was, you know, masking something. I didn't recognize that at all. But looking back now, I reckon that was probably a something. Certainly, my behaviors of spending on designer clothing was not normal. I had far too many trainers, far too many shirts. You know, I had far too much of everything. I didn't need any of that really. And I've certainly worked on that. So they're negative in the sense that, you know, there's probably money there that I could have saved and didn't. But I've never been involved. I've never been involved with alcohol or drugs, or you know, I've never resorted to any like obvious signs of self-harm. Nothing like that. But I guess, you know, as a coping strategy, the things that I've identified are that exactly. They are ways of coping with something, and the gym certainly for a long period of time was a coping strategy. Yeah. And when I'd established what was going on and had a better understanding of myself, and I could manage my emotions a little bit better, the gym then turned into the place to go to escape things rather than feeling like I had to be there. I wanted to be there, you know. Yeah. I think that was the difference. But I've always been very fortunate.
Point you've made. Such a powerful point. That same thing that can do you so much good is the same thing can actually destroy you as well in that sense. Absolutely. Yeah.
And you know, not just the gym training and lifting weights, but mental health muscle, you know, that gym environment, social media, the fitness industry on social media, all of the fake relationships that you think you have, you know, all those friends that you think are by your side and support you and they love you and they appreciate you. And then when you fall and crash, nobody's in a mile of sight. Nobody's there. Everybody's gone. Nobody cares, you know? And I went through that massively. I thought I had a lot of friends, big people, you know, on your level of celebrityism, Nick, you know, like people that,
pig.
People that were well known worldwide, big figures, supported mental health muscle. I developed friendships with, but really they weren't, mate. They weren't friends. They weren't friendships. They were just, you know,
superficial.
Absolutely. And they all disappeared when mental health muscle came to an end. You know, they just vanished, like nowhere to be seen. You know,
I think
that was hard. That was hard.
you've hit the nail on the head there. I know when I left social media in May 2020, I know I shared it on here before, but for context, that 40% of my business was done through social media. But for me, firstly, your mental health has to take absolute priority. And like you, constantly talking about being in mental health and stuff, it's bit, and even though it's not at you, it's around you all the time. And there was, again, that toxic kind of element of it, that was just after the start of the pandemic. So you saw relationships falling out on a timeline, and it wasn't, even though it directly wasn't me, it was, you just saw this happening. You end up feeling worse 20 minutes later after you pick up the phone. And in May 2020, I left and I never looked back. A piece descended 2 weeks later. For 2 weeks, I thought everyone was trying to get hold of me, but when a piece descended, I never went back. And this just reminds me of why, actually. And it's not, I must say, it's not necessarily the platforms. There is an argument to say that's a part of it, but it's about our immersion. And if we're not feeling well enough to engage, then that's our right, surely. But there seems to be a societal pressure that we have to be everywhere always.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and you've hit the nail on the head with that as well. You know, that several times I can remember, you know, I wouldn't post something for a day, or I wouldn't put some content out on Mental Health Muscle page, and there'd be messages of like, where have you gone? Like, what are you doing? Like, give me a, like, you know, there's an actual person behind this screen. You know, I had to start posting, like, they didn't do stories at the time on Instagram, but I had to start posting things like, you know, new post incoming in 2 days' time, so that people, like, you know, it was absolutely mad. And, you know, that wasn't what that's a wonderful thing, that you've got so many people so concerned about something so important, but it can become dangerous. Like, it becomes too much. And I think that becoming too much bit was kind of my bucket, just unmanageable. Totally unmanageable.
And you're even tapping into the entrepreneurial challenges there as well. So mental health muscle and that aside, purely as a business owner, as an entrepreneur trying to get this off the ground, that constant comparison, that constant, like, kind of looking at everybody else and what they're doing and stuff, that it's soul destroying in a way, isn't it? And I think that's the reason why one of my earliest mentors, a guy called Brad Burton, said, like, run your own race. There's a reason why racehorses wear blinkers. Run your own race. And I think that's something I really try to stay aligned to, is to keep focused on what is it I'm doing. Am I okay, for, like you said, first and foremost? But that's tough too, isn't it? Even just trying to do your own thing. How do you find that transition kind of back into, I know it's not just employment because you have kind of a portfolio career now, but how have you found that transition from being in employment and then also doing your own thing freelance as well? What's that look like for you professionally?
So it's kind of been a bit of a roller coaster, really. So I was always just employment. I was always just employed, supporting people, nice salary at the end of every month. You know, we're good to go. And then I started believing that there was more to life than just working for someone else. And I felt like there was a life working for myself as well. But I didn't want to let go of the kind of employment life, because that's scary. It's daunting. It's risky business, and money's important because we need to pay our bills, right? So I'll do a little side hustle thing. So I started a clothing business at some point in this journey.
Wow.
Like 3 or 4 years, did really well. Didn't really take much from it because I put in what I invested, what I saw, you know, it was kind of a tit for tat. But it did all right. It was good. I had a nice team of ambassadors, did a bit of fitness stuff, and that was cool. But never going to make me millions of pounds, because I didn't have the capacity, knowledge, or the drive to forget what I was doing in employment sense and do that. So that kind of disappeared. Then mental health muscle started. So for me, I guess we've had an employment, dabbled in a little bit, but kept employment. Then we've gone just back to employment. Then we've dabbled in mental health muscle. I truly believe mental health muscle was my time to leave employment and start something from a freelance kind of entrepreneur business side. But I didn't have the acumen, Nick. I just had the passion. I didn't have the people with me who could have turned mental health muscle into an absolute monster of a business. And I didn't have that with me. And I think a lot of that was, I don't want anybody else with me. Like, this is my baby. And that was maybe a downfall as well. There's lots of different things that contribute to this downfall, Nick.
But that's interesting, because we were, I mean, quite openly, we were saying just before we hit record, actually, I've got this huge kind of, it's not fear of delegation, and it's also not it's not this kind of belief that I don't think anyone do it as good as I can. I've just got this kind of, and you've just nailed it actually, that it's my baby, actually, it's my brand, it's me, and I to kind of subcontract any part of that, I've got a real block with, but I know to progress, that's something we got to navigate. So I get that completely, actually.
And I think, you know, although my face was never on the logo, it was its own branding. Inevitably, it was me. It was me.
Oh, it was you.
I was mental health muscle. I had a team of volunteers that did a few things here and there over the country, and I was very grateful for that. But they made no decisions, no strategic, nothing. You know, decision making was me, coordination was me, events was me, funding was me, everything was me. And in essence, I was mental health muscle. And eventually, that was too much.
Yeah.
Simple as that. And that's the end line. It was too much. And I think my message to people would be that if you feel like something is becoming too much and it's at the detriment to your own mental well-being and your own health, then you need to make a decision as to whether that thing continues or not, because it can destroy us. You know, those things that get too much can destroy us. And I wasn't allowing it to do so. Although it nearly did, I wasn't going to let that happen. So
that aligns with obsessive compulsive kind of behavior, that kind of checking in if you're doing something through compulsion over choice, really something to check in on, that actually doing something you don't really want to do but you feel compelled to do it. Like I said, it's a really healthy check-in. And as you're walking, living, breathing testament to, self-awareness is everything. Even if you're not in the right place or feeling the right things, to be able to ask yourself the right questions is huge.
You know, I think,
look at the clock. I can't believe how quickly this you're definitely coming back for an episode 2. I haven't got anywhere where I want to go with you yet. So I guess before we kind of bring it to a close, I want to, there's 2 things I want to ask you, I guess. There's 3 things technically, but everybody gets asked the last one. So the 2 things I specifically want to ask you. From your bouncing days then, do you have any kind of comedic experiences or kind of stories to tell about your bouncing days?
Yeah, well,
war stories.
My wife won't like this one too much, but being a bouncer as a university student in and around the hustle and bustle, you know, you were a bit of a babe magnet, Nick, and you know, you kind of carried this aura, alpha male guy in a tie, stood at a door, looks like he's got a lot of authority, dominant, older than me. Wow, cool. And he's a student. What? That's weird. He goes to the same uni as me. That's attractive. So, you know, often, and it wasn't just me, it was all my boys, but like, you know, often we used to get like little piece of paper in your hand at the end of a night as they left the building. It was amazing. It was an amazing time of my life. Really enjoyed it, actually. Did Leeds Fest a few times. So I did stage security at Leeds Fest. So I kind of stood between the crowd and the performers, holding people back with, you know, it was really, really good. Good time of my life, but times have changed, and bouncing now is not a case of just making sure people aren't drunk. You know, there's a lot to deal with now, and that was a no-go zone for me moving forward. But yeah, good time of my life. But good question.
And how did you manage to kind of keep your mindset in check? Because I guess that, again, generalism, but with that kind of alpha mindset comes if your territory is challenged in any way, in any environment, your human response is to push back straight away, where obviously that may not be the best thing to do. Was that hard to manage? Yeah,
difficult. And again, like I've said before about these alpha male roles, I guess I always tried to bring the softer approach. So as a doorman, and eventually as the head doorman, with a team of lads that kind of worked under me in various different places, you know, I tried to instill there are better ways to deal with stuff than just being the alpha male, knock them to the floor, drag them to the road and let the police deal with them. You know, there's a lot of people just want to be talked to like human beings. And if there's something wrong and there's an issue and there's something that's creating a bit of a challenge or a bit of conflict, there are lots of steps that you can take to bring someone back down from a level to a level before you get on board this alpha male. I'm the doorman. I'm going to kick your ass. Get out of here. You know, there are ways in which you can do that. Obviously, under the influence of alcohol and often drugs in the university scene, it's difficult. But always going with that softer approach as a first go-to. And then if that doesn't work, then of course you have to use very, survival skills, if you like. At the end of the day, if there's a threat to life or there's a threat to whatever, you have to do something about it. But definitely tried to be the soft touch as often as I could first, because that often worked with people. Because a lot of these lads, a lot of these girls that come to the door and are drunk and disorderly, they're actually going through a lot of struggles as well, mate. And we don't think about that. We just think that they're drunk, but actually, why are they so drunk? Like, they're covering up a lot of issues, and they just want to be spoken to and treated like human beings. And then, do the nice thing as often as you can. Always.
Yeah, I like that. That's a really nice message, actually. I think that finally, the question I want to ask you specifically is that you seem to have, you do have that kind of aura of being at one with stuff now, especially now, I think. Yeah. But I think that's always been there for you ever since I've known you anyway. And I think you've got this kind of career which has a great balance with your own personal life as well. So maybe the question is kind of irrelevant, but what's next for Aaron Clark? Is there anything that you've got kind of a big outrageous goal, or actually is it to make sure that kind of equilibrium stays?
Yeah, I like equilibrium. I like where I'm at. For a long time, I wasn't in this place where, I had career, personal, family life all in the right place. My priorities have certainly rejiggled themselves around, and they won't be shifted again now. That's I can confidently say I feel like that's where they need to be and will be now for years and years. But of course, there's more in me, Nick. I want to. It's difficult. I want and I need to. I think is where I'm at. I want to bring mental health muscle back in some capacity. I feel like there's a fire there that's still alight, but at the moment there's absolutely zero someone that can play with that fire and make it bright again. There's nobody that can do that right now, not even me. And I don't want to do that, but I feel like there is an energy there still that can grow. When that does, I don't know. And I've always said that. I've always stood by that, but I'm not putting any timescales on that or how that would look or everything. But for me at the moment, career, and I'm enjoying my career. I'm loving where I'm at. My family are very important to me. My little children are my life.
Amazing.
And that's the priority right now. So the other stuff can come and go as it pleases. And I do my very best to just do what I can and give back when I can in whatever shape or form that might look.
Fantastic. I have had the pleasure of introducing you to the stage. But if I were the MC of the O2 Arena in London, 20,000 people cheering and chanting your name, you sat back in the green room and you hear me call your name. Your walk-on music kicks in, that song that motivates you, that lifts you to get you at peak state. Aaron Clark, what would be your walk-on music and why?
Oh, that's a really good question. So there's lots of different songs, lots of different tracks. I think for me, I love a soundtrack. I love a soundtrack without any words. I'm a big soundtrack man. I love Hans Zimmer, massive fan of Hans Zimmer. Yeah. So I'd probably go for a Transformers, Lord of the Rings type soundtrack. No words, just real energy, increase in noise, increase in volume, gets louder and more dramatic and orchestral. Something like that, mate. I would go for walking onto stage, and just let the sound do the talking. No words needed.
Love that. Aaron Clark, give it up. Big round of applause.
Thank you, mate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed that chat. And everyone else, I'm sure you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Guaranteed he will be coming back. He doesn't know this yet, but he will be coming back. Aaron, big thank you for your time and joining us on the show today. Really, really enjoyed it.
I appreciate your time.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And to everybody else, please do hit subscribe, like, and all that jazz. I'm not a details guy. Whatever it takes to get you back here next Monday, do that thing. We have a next amazing episode with the wonderful Lucy Griffiths, one not to miss. So please do stay tuned, and I'll see you again next Monday. In the meantime, take care, be happy, stay well. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.